The year 2025 has plunged the Middle East into its most perilous crisis in decades, a moment that many feared but few truly believed would arrive so soon. For the first time in modern history, Israel and Iran are locked in direct, open military conflict, shattering years of shadow warfare and proxy battles that had defined their rivalry. The skies above both nations are now filled with the roar of fighter jets and the streaks of missiles. This is no mere border skirmish, but a full-scale confrontation that threatens to engulf the region. The conflict erupted just 5 days ago, when Israel launched a surprise strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, claiming it was a necessary move to prevent Tehran from acquiring a nuclear bomb and shifting the balance of power in the region. The human cost has been immediate and devastating. Hundreds are already dead, with families torn apart and entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble. The toll is rising by the hour. In Israel, air raid sirens send citizens scrambling to bomb shelters, while in Tehran, evacuation warnings blare from loudspeakers, signs of a threat neither side has ever faced on this scale. The rules of engagement have been rewritten overnight. Military commanders on both sides are forced to adapt to a rapidly changing battlefield where old strategies no longer apply. Iran has retaliated with waves of missile and drone attacks, breaking psychological barriers and escalating the cycle of violence. The sense of fear and uncertainty is palpable across the region. The world now waits anxiously to see if the United States, Israel's staunchest ally, will be drawn into the conflict, a move that could either help contain the violence or ignite a regional inferno with global consequences. The stakes could not be higher, not just for the Middle East, but for the entire international order. As leaders gather for emergency meetings, the world holds its breath, hoping for a path away from catastrophe. Subscribe, like, and share Cosmo Academia. The US has launched a major military buildup in the Middle East and Europe, rapidly increasing its military presence in response to rising tensions and unpredictable threats. This surge is not just about numbers, it's about sending a clear, unmistakable signal to both allies and adversaries alike. But American officials insist these moves are strictly defensive, not a prelude to war. The goal is to deter aggression, reassure partners, and prevent the conflict from spiraling out of control. The message to Tehran and other regional actors is clear. America's restraint should not be mistaken for weakness. The US is prepared to defend its interests, and it warns others not to test its resolve. Two powerful carrier strike groups, including the USS Nimitz and USS Carl Vinson, now patrol the waters near Iran. Each is bristling with advanced fighter jets, missile systems, and thousands of sailors, ready to respond to any threat at a moment's notice. US Navy destroyers have moved closer to Israel, strengthening missile defense and expanding surveillance capabilities. Their presence is a shield, not a sword, meant to protect, not provoke. The Air Force has deployed dozens of tanker aircraft across Europe, enabling rapid, sustained air operations. These tankers are the lifeline for fighter jets and bombers, ensuring they can stay airborne and ready for any contingency. Heavy transport jets stand ready on runways, prepared to move troops and equipment at a moment's notice. This logistical muscle means the US can reinforce its positions or evacuate personnel quickly if the situation deteriorates. Despite this formidable show of force, the White House continues to emphasize restraint. Officials stress that the US is not joining Israel's attacks and remains firmly in a defensive posture, seeking to avoid escalation. A White House spokesperson reiterated, "We will defend American interests," carefully avoiding any mention of offensive action, and underscoring the administration's desire to prevent a wider war. The Pentagon has authorized the voluntary evacuation of military families from bases in the Middle East, a sobering reminder of the real danger on the ground, even as officials work tirelessly to avoid direct involvement in the conflict. The US is walking a diplomatic and military tightrope, projecting strength and resolve, but determined to avoid being pulled into another protracted Middle East war. Every move is calculated, every message carefully crafted. The world is watching closely, anxious to see if this strategy of deterrence and restraint will hold, or if a single miscalculation could ignite a much larger conflict. In this high-stakes standoff, the next move could change everything, altering the course of events not just in the region but around the globe. Subscribe, like, and share Cosmo Academia. President Trump, in his second term, faces a crisis that will define his foreign policy legacy. He's cut short the G7 summit, convened his national security team, and is managing the crisis from the White House. Trump's public statements have swung between calls for a deal and hints that Israel and Iran may have to fight it out. On June 16th, he posted, "Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon," signaling a hard line. His call to evacuate Tehran was a stark warning, not a direct threat, but a sign of how grave the situation is. Trump's strategy is maximum pressure with a possible diplomatic off-ramp, supporting Israel's campaign but keeping U.S. forces out of direct combat. It's a high-wire act with the risk of a single misstep leading to disaster. Is the Trump administration aiming for regime change in Tehran? The evidence says no. The stated U.S. priority: prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, not topple the regime. Trump reportedly rejected an Israeli plan to assassinate Iran's supreme leader, setting limits on escalation. The focus remains on crippling Iran's nuclear program to force a new, tougher deal. The strategy is coercive diplomacy: pressure Iran to negotiate from weakness, not to overthrow its government. The administration bets Iran values survival over nuclear ambitions, but this is a risky gamble. If Iran lashes out, the conflict could widen and force America's hand. Even if containment works, Iran's destabilizing activities will persist. For now, the US chooses strategic containment over regime change. Subscribe, like, and share Cosmo Academia. The war began with a bold Israeli strike on June 12th, targeting Iran's most critical nuclear sites. This was no minor raid. It aimed to cripple Iran's nuclear program for years. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu declared the strikes set Iran's program back a very, very long time. The IDF hit major facilities like Natanz, aiming to destroy centrifuges and infrastructure built over decades. Israel's message: a nuclear-armed Iran is an existential threat, and military action was the only option left. The attack triggered a dangerous cycle. 9 waves of Iranian missile attacks have followed. Israel's bold move puts pressure on the US to provide a defensive backstop and prevent escalation. The region's stability now hangs in the balance. Israel started the fight, but may need America to help contain its consequences. Among Israel's targets, the Fordow fuel enrichment plant stands out, an underground fortress built to survive any attack. Fordow is buried under 80 meters of rock, likely impervious to Israeli munitions. Only the US possesses the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, a bomb capable of destroying such hardened sites. If Israel's strikes can't neutralize Fordow, pressure mounts on the US to intervene directly. This Fordow conundrum is central to Washington's calculations. Trump's vow that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon may be tested if Fordow survives. Pentagon analysts are scrutinizing satellite imagery to assess the damage. If Fordow remains operational, calls for US action will intensify. The fate of this single facility could trigger a much wider conflict. America's next move may decide the region's future. While the administration projects strength abroad, America is deeply divided at home. War weariness runs high. Many in Congress and the public oppose another Middle East conflict. Bipartisan lawmakers are moving to require congressional approval for any US military action against Iran. This is a direct challenge to presidential war powers, reflecting skepticism about intervention. The debate pits those who see a nuclear Iran as an existential threat against those who warn of endless wars and heavy costs. President Trump faces real constraints. He cannot ignore public opinion or Congress. Going to war without broad support would be politically perilous. The voices of caution are strong, ensuring any escalation will be fiercely contested. Domestic division is a powerful check on America's next steps. Subscribe, like, and share Cosmo Academia. Even as military tensions soar, frantic diplomacy is underway behind the scenes. President Trump has ordered his team to seek immediate talks with Iran, aiming for a ceasefire. America's European allies, especially France, are working as intermediaries, desperate to prevent a regional catastrophe. The core issue ironclad guarantees Iran won't develop nuclear weapons in exchange for sanctions relief and security assurances. Both sides face immense domestic pressure to show strength, making compromise difficult. Yet the threat of devastating war is a powerful incentive to negotiate. For Iran, regime survival is at stake. For Israel, national security. For the US, regional stability and the global economy. The diplomatic dance is desperate, but it may be the only hope to pull the region back from the brink. The world watches, hoping for a breakthrough. The clock is ticking. The world stands at a crossroads, and America's next move will shape the future. The choices made in the coming days will ripple far beyond borders, affecting millions of lives and the balance of power across continents. 3 scenarios loom on the horizon, each with profound consequences. The first, a ceasefire and a new nuclear deal, painstakingly negotiated by diplomats determined to avoid disaster. The second, a limited US strike if Israel's attacks fall short, a calculated show of force meant to deter further escalation but fraught with uncertainty. Or the third, and most dangerous, a catastrophic regional war if Iran escalates, drawing in armies and unleashing chaos across the Middle East. The best case, diplomacy prevails, the crisis is contained, and the US avoids direct combat. In this scenario, hope is restored, and the world breathes a collective sigh of relief. The middle path, America intervenes surgically, risking escalation. Precision strikes may buy time, but they also risk igniting a wider conflict that could spiral out of control. The worst, full-scale war engulfs the region, with staggering costs. Cities could be reduced to rubble, and millions may be displaced, creating a humanitarian crisis of historic proportions. The outcome depends on military realities, diplomatic maneuvering, and political will in Washington, Jerusalem, and Tehran. Every decision, every hesitation could tip the scales toward peace or war. Trump's goal? Dismantle Iran's nuclear threat without a major war, using Israeli action as leverage. But the risks are enormous, and the margin for error is razor-thin. It's a strategy of immense risk, with the world on edge. Every headline, every market fluctuation reflects the tension and uncertainty gripping the globe. As of June 17, 2025, the situation remains on a knife's edge. Time is running out, and the stakes have never been higher. The world watches, hoping the path to peace, however narrow, can still be found. Ordinary people everywhere yearn for stability and an end to violence. The next days will decide the fate of the Middle East. The choices made now will echo for generations, shaping the destiny of nations and the lives of millions. Subscribe, like, and share Cosmo Academia.